Cool. All right. So it was this morning was quite funny. Like I'm used to doing this sort of stuff with men usually, like a lot of these kind of podcast style and interview style stuff. Danny, first thing this morning, what you wearing? The fuck? Like I don't know. When we usually do it with men, we just like press record. Don't even look in the mirror. Um, so as you can see,
Masses.
I've made no different effort than usual. Danny's made an effort this morning, movie star. Um, so something I was thinking about topic wise this morning, especially on the way to work, like we want to make this, a lot about obviously about fitness, about people achieving their goals. But what was interesting, especially from a coaching point of view, and I want to get your take on this a little bit, is what do you think it is? Like this is kind of counterintuitive, right? I believe that being a good coach long term is all about teaching your clients to do this stuff for themselves. The irony of teaching your clients to do all this stuff for yourselves is that they then go off and do it for themselves and stop paying you. I think if you're a confident coach, obviously you get good results with your clients. You're always going to be getting new business and new clients. So, the goal should be to have people go off once they've achieved their weight loss or body composition kind of goals and go off and do this for themselves. You shouldn't, there's a few areas where you might need a coach for life, but by and large, I don't think that should be the goal in the fitness industry, right? But that said, what do you think it is with fitness specifically where we see a lot of people come in, they smash their initial goal, go away, and to somewhat then go, I can look after myself now, and then go and put all that weight back on and actually go back to exactly where they started, if not maybe sometimes worse. Sometimes they come back, sometimes they seek out someone different and have to start all over again. It's like it's the only industry, it's the only thing I can think of whereby, because it relies on a lot of self-discipline, that you can come back into this environment worse than you were in the first place. Like if you get a coach and you learn a bit of a sport, right, or you go and you learn guitar or whatever, and then you take a break, you go back, you should still know the basics. You don't go, I can't remember how to do it at all, right? But this very specific, what do you think it is about the either the method that coaches use, the personality potentially of the client? Where do you see that issue, and how would we mitigate that with a client when they move on from you?
Well, I think it's because, I mean, I sit down with and do consultations with everyone. And I've done it for years, in various countries. And I've done, probably in the hundreds, thousands at this point. And everyone, like you said, comes in wanting to say, I want to learn as much as I can and take it away and do this on my own. And I think it's because people see it as a very linear process. It's I'm at this point A, and I want to get to point B, and then I'm done.
Mm.
And they don't think about having to upkeep everything that they've learned. And I think we talk in the fitness industry a lot about what their why is,
Mm.
as cheesy as it is, and it's we're not psychologists, we're not therapists, but I do think tapping into that is important, even if it's getting the client to put pen to paper of this is what I want to achieve and this is why. Because ultimately that's what's going to keep them coming back and keeping up all those habits. And what you said is like I think people know, once they go through a process of losing weight, putting on muscle, training, I think they know. They don't forget that.
No.
People intrinsically already know how to eat healthy. They know what they need to do to lose weight for the most part, unless there's some underlying issue. Um, the thing is that they don't want to do it.
No, so that was kind of my question. Why do you think that it's so common to go and do 3 to 6 months somewhere, get somewhat close to the goal, start looking the way you want to look, but the minute they walk out of the door and don't come back, it all starts to fall apart. Do you think that's a coaching problem as well as as well as an individual problem? Like,
A society
'cause
problem.
it's common. It's so common, and I think it's something we should be looking to solve. Um, for people. And again, in my role over the years, I tend to blame coaches for everything, right? And I totally understand that the individual, this is a process. It's a two-way process,
Mm.
right? Your client, your athlete, whoever it is you're working with, has to put the work in. But I do believe that if you don't, you know, if you don't assess the client or the athlete very well, and you're not assessing why they're needing you over time, and then they leave you and go off and just completely stop doing everything they did with you, there was an issue somewhere in your coaching method as far as the psychology that you were trying to achieve. Like, again, telling someone what to do, especially if they're willing to do it, is kind of the easy part, but making it a lifestyle for somebody
Well,
so that they don't go backwards is a challenge.
I do think from a coaching perspective, what is valuable is kind of, letting them to a degree do what they want, but then revisiting and saying, like, almost doing some psychology on them, like, right, okay, so what led you to that craving?
Mm.
And okay, then you went out and you had that meal, or you ordered that Uber Eats or whatever. How did you feel afterwards? Did you feel good afterwards? How was your gut? Did
Yeah.
you were there any regrets about that meal? And just kind of revisiting that and being
Mm.
like, right, okay, now remember this feeling, write down that feeling,
Mm.
and next time you get that craving or that desire to indulge, go back and read that.
Yeah.
Almost like play the tape forward so you don't revisit that, because it's that compounding, that repeated behavior that then gets you being overweight, lethargic, or whatever. Or if you decide, like, yeah, okay, I'm going to train Monday, Wednesday, Friday on my own, and hey, Monday comes around and you're like, oh, I'll just do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like, don't tell me that you're not feeling it. There's no remorse, there's no regret of, I didn't do what I said I was going to do.
But I think, like you know, action reaction, right?
Mm.
Like, so again, coming back to the coaching aspect of that, not everyone's going to respond to feelings. So feelings might not be the best way to go. It depends on the individual, right? But teaching accountability, like, again, I don't want to, I'm gonna come across like the coach basher through a lot of these, and I'm not really, but it's kind of like, okay, from what I've seen from a lot of coaches, like, client goes off track,
Yeah.
right? Coach, okay, don't worry about it, let it go, let's get back on track today, right? Is that good coaching? Like, I don't think so.
No.
Now, I do think there's a let it go aspect, right? You don't want to have the person dwell on, oh, I had a bad day. Totally get that. But there's got to be more to, don't worry about it, let's get back on track tomorrow. Because I see that so many times with coaches when they start to lose their client a little bit. And it's because they're just like, yeah, yeah, don't worry about it, let's get back on track tomorrow. They don't want it, they're not. And it's not about telling your client off. It's about, okay, what is the teaching point to that bad day?
You got to call them out on their shit. But you have to get to that level of relationship with that client as well, where you're comfortable, confident to do that, and making sure that the client doesn't take it badly.
Yeah.
But it's almost like being a boss,
Mm,
right? A boss is always going to call their employee out on their shit, because the employee has deadlines. The business has business goals, business
yeah.
deadlines. And it's almost treating it like that type of relationship. The only difference is the client is paying the coach.
They
And
are,
so
but
that's what makes that relationship a
yeah.
little bit more
But
tricky.
yeah, 100%. But do you think, again, I was thinking about this a little bit this morning, and I think sometimes, we've talked about this with trainers, like, oh, clients are paying a lot of money, they're expecting a certain amount of service, which they 100% are. But I think if you're relying on the money being the motivator for them to do what you're asking them to do, I think that's a huge mistake, because most people, that's not going to be their motivation. Yeah, we sometimes, oh, they just dropped a ton of money. Right now is where they're going to be the most motivated. It's like, trust me, you might spend weeks deliberating over spending a certain amount of money on something, but I only know from my own experience, like once I've spent the money, it's gone. Now that's really not like the motivator anymore. It might motivate me to go and do the sessions because I paid for them, right? But if I go and buy, you know, an expensive pair of fucking Jordan shoes or something, which I've done, $600 to me is like an insane amount of money on a pair of shoes, and I'll
Yes.
stand in the shop thinking and being like, and then I have my fuck it moment. I buy them, and the minute I've walked out the shop, I'm all right. That money's gone. And in a couple of days, a couple of weeks, I check my bank account. I'm not like, oh my god, $600 down, right? And it's gone, and I'm okay with it being gone. And I think when people drop money on personal training, there's a similar thing to accept. It's a monthly payment, or you're paying it on the go. So when the payment comes round again, then you're like, okay, is this worth it? But I don't think it's the motivator that, oh, I've spent all this money, so I've got to stay on my food and nutrition, because I don't think people think like that. And I think, you know, getting people to, like, the education part of, as simple as it sounds, again, action reaction, understanding what something cost you, if you went 1,000 calories over, 2,000 calories over, we somehow have to learn to get that back. We can let it go, but are we going to do things the following week to get that back? Are we going to increase our cardio? What did it cost you, right? Are we going to drop our calories the following week a little bit to kind of get ourselves back on track? Or, rightly so, maybe we do go with the just let it go, forget about it, but now we're another week behind achieving our target in that week, in the weeks we set. So instead of it being 12 weeks, now it's going to take 13 weeks, 14 weeks. I think continually, and I think this is why people are that like tech and the watches and the Whoop and things are quite good, because that thing isn't personal.
Mm.
But if you're tracking on that thing, it tells you daily. Now it's up to you. You can choose to ignore it. You can choose to be accountable to it. But if you're tracking your calories, like, it'll come up big bright red numbers. You went over today. You know, if you and a lot of them now will go, okay, at this pace, you will be at your target weight in 8 weeks. Now, if you keep fucking up, and next week it's like you will be at your target weight in 8 weeks, and then the following week you will be at your target weight in 8 weeks. You're like, well, that's 3 weeks. I'm still 8 weeks away. I could be 5 weeks away now. Like, again, different mindsets and different mentalities will buy into different things. But I think as a coach, figuring out what is working for somebody and what they go, we have a client, Turbo would be an example. The minute he will, and again, can be good and bad because the people can obsess over it. But the minute he sees numbers, he tries to beat those numbers.
Mm.
Now that isn't always great either, but it's like, okay, now I know what motivates this person, but I want to use that, but also control it. And I think sometimes coaches and trainers are not very good at deciphering the personality of, like, a client or an athlete, working out what makes them tick quickly, and then establishing metrics within their training and within their nutrition that they are excited to track, follow, chase, whatever that might be. Because I think once you get that, that helps people speed up. When someone's not beholden really to anything, it's like, why are they doing it? Other than the goal of, I want to look this way in 12
So
weeks,
how
6 months.
quickly do you think people can decipher, or we can decipher that? As a, okay, what is your person? What's going to make you tick? What's your motivator? I think that's also challenging.
Mm,
Like if you're starting a client off and you have 12 weeks and it takes you a week,
yeah.
and say you're training them 3 times a week, so you get 3 hours to really decipher and figure out, okay, what makes this person tick. Um, Assuming 3 hours of training.
Mm,
And yeah, there's communication outside of the sessions, but that's not an easy thing to do. But I do think you're right in terms of figuring out what is going to motivate them. But it's also, and you brought up a lot of things, and I find it interesting, looking at obviously the numbers, numerical side of things versus the personality side of things, because why would, like, if chat gpt and all this ai stuff on all these apps and stuff are all so good, then why isn't the world thin? or
But,
jacked
well, like you
or
said,
ripped.
but
Like
that
if it's that accessible and that easy, if you just look at how much apps have exploded and trackers and on wearables and all that kind of stuff, then why are we not, and then you throw in Ozempic, it's like, why are we not all at our goal aesthetic?
because people are different, right? And not everyone. And again, this can be as simple as you know, this comes down to you can only get through so much in your intake, in your intake session and questions. But as you get more experience, I think, you know, and I can look at this in many different ways, right? I can look at this with our team, and I can look at it with some of our clients, and you can immediately, get to grips with, like you said, if someone's numbers and stats driven, like, did they walk in here and do their consult and they're already showing you their whoop?
Yes.
They're not even started yet, but they have a whoop and it goes, it tells me my sleep. It tells you, and you know, they're not doing anything to fix any of these numbers, but they're already using it, right? Or, you've got the flip side of the person who doesn't even know how to, you know, barely use a computer. And we see that when we hire coaches. Some coaches come in and they're great on their spreadsheets. They're great with the computer. They know how to use all of that stuff. Maybe they grew up with it. And again, it's not always doesn't always go hand in hand. But you hire a slightly older coach who didn't come up that way, and they think they can do everything in their mind, and like just turning the computer on is hard work. So now you're like, okay, well, I need you to kind of learn and understand this stuff, but this may never be your strength, and this is not what's going to motivate you necessarily to be a great coach. We need some of it, but what you're really good at here is maybe what this person's not really good at here, and you want those two to kind of gel to become a great coach. Someone who's quiet and into spreadsheets might not be the greatest on the gym floor. Some are great at both. And I think with clients, it's like it depends what you believe in, right? And I believe in this sometimes and not always, but if you believe in that how you do one thing is how you do everything, I think sometimes tapping into that with our questions, I would say a lot of our clients in this kind of setting, so a lot of Gen Pop clients that can afford $1,500, $2,000 a month of personal training, I would suggest are fairly successful people, right? So if you already know that someone's successful, now you maybe instead of being like, oh, what's your why, what's your goal, like you got to know what all that is. But okay, what makes you successful? And this is a tough question to ask someone because when you ask someone why you're successful, like it's awkward. People like
Yeah.
to answer it. But if you can figure out, you would be a prime example, right? And again, you would probably have to sit and think about this, but you played rugby at a professional level, right? Then you decided to start doing powerlifting, and you were like, you know, top. You won our world championship. You were definitely probably top 10 in the world um, at one point. Successful, right?
Mm.
That's not just stepping on a platform and lifting a weight up and down. Now you're a bodybuilder. You've got your pro card, and again, there's a ton of bodybuilders out there. Hard to say you're exactly this in the world, but New York Pro, high level. Most of the best bodybuilders in the world are at that show, and you're finishing in the top 20
A
in the
plate.
world, right? Like to be anything where you can say I'm this number in the world and it's pretty fucking high up is rare, right? To be a world champion is rare. Not many people get that when you actually look at the population. So you've done I know that's
Making me blush.
all in fitness and training. Now, this might take a bit of digging and whatever, and we're not going to get to it today. But there's a psychological component. Yes, you're naturally pretty gifted, and you're athletic, and you were born athletic. Your dad was an athlete. There's a bit of it in your family. And having met your dad, he's fucking competitive, right? So there's things in you that have made you that. Now, you just happen to, when you started doing sports, be good at them. But there's something in you that allows you to go from this sport to this sport to this sport, and somewhat, and again, some of it intertwines. Powerlifting, bodybuilding, even rugby to a certain degree. There's a strength and physicalness component to those sports, right? And I'm not saying they're not thinking sports, rugby certainly is, but there's something that ties all that together that's made you successful in all of those things.
Well, it's interesting because I think it's trying to figure out, okay, yes, what makes a client tick, but I think what is universal is people who sign up for personal training, I think there's an element of competitiveness with themselves. They want to be the best version of themselves, right? Which means being better than they are at that moment, right? So there's already an acknowledgement of I can be better. Um, how the coach can kind of play off of that, I would say, is feeding into that, saying like you did this last week, you can do this today, feeding into that. But then also from a camaraderie perspective of I want this for you, I know you can do this, don't let me down, you know
Potential.
and then also these successful people, there's some sort of ego,
Oh, there has to be.
there's some sort of self-esteem,
Mm.
right? So again, it's just playing into those things, and those things are universal, and I think that's something that a watch can't replace,
No, 100%.
a tracker can't replace, chat gpt can't replace. So there's that aspect, but then what you were saying about the psychological aspects, looking at someone's upbringing, looking at what their lifestyle is like. And again, this is kind of going down a whole nother rabbit hole of what shapes someone, what makes them the way that they are today, that is going to get them to the person that they want to be. And I've listened to a whole bunch of podcasts. I've read a lot of Mel Robbins. If you look at Simon Sinek and all that kind of stuff, there's so many ways that you can kind of delve into this. Um, but then just deciphering that is so challenging.
Oh, look, massively. That's what I'm kind of saying. There's not a black and white answer to this, but I do believe personality traits play an awful lot into achieving the things you want to achieve, right? And where you might need to put the work in. And again, I'm not just saying this because it's you, but if I compare me and you, right? As far
This is
as
gonna be fun.
no, as far as the things we're pretty good at,
Yeah,
right? When I watch you do stuff, you're pretty good at almost everything you do, right?
babe. Oh,
Because I've seen it, we've done a lot of things
do you want to
together.
repeat that? Just rewind that and then just replay that one more time.
But an example, like a few examples that I'm either I don't want to say really good at something. Like I never, when I got into, obviously sports, and especially fight sports, boxing particularly, I knew very early on, right, that I wasn't going to be a world champion, wasn't even going to be British champion. The best I could hope for was my local area, which was kind of Lancashire. Very, very small fry. And I was listening to someone talk about this the other day, and it was in a powerlifting setting as well. It was the same thing that they were naturally very, very strong. They got into and started powerlifting, but they already knew that their numbers on the world stage, especially in the men's, they were like, I'm training with, and I know these people that are like so much stronger than me that I already know that I'm just stepping on stage two, and with powerlifting, get my own numbers. But I'm so far off what these guys are gonna be. So you can start a sport, and it doesn't mean you're gonna go from zero. You're never gonna go from like zero, being one of the worst in the world, to the best. It happens, but usually there's an entry point where you're like when you got into rugby, you were in the national team pretty quick.
Yeah.
So all of that sets a bar, right? Your first powerlifting comp, your numbers were some of the best in the world for a natural competitor. So you now all of a sudden that first comp sets you up of like, fuck, I've just finished fifth and I've never done this before in the world. So you're already setting your eyes on being the best in the world potentially because you're already so close having just tried it. Whereas someone who tries something for the first time like me, and you're good at it, but you're so far off being like challenging for titles and you're like, okay, my goal is just to win my next fight if possible, or not get knocked out, whatever. So your setting point is very, very different, right? Even when I played a bit of rugby, I played in the first team, but in the first team in a lower division. And the team was okay, but it certainly wasn't going to become a pro rugby player, play for my country, and da 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 da. Like I knew
Yeah,
early
but
on.
men's rugby in England is slightly different to women's rugby in Hong
I,
Kong,
I get
especially
that.
15 years
I
ago.
get that, but it sets you no matter what, it kind of sets your tone potentially for how far you can go. And also the age at which you start doing it makes a big difference. If you know sports, if you're getting into something, when you're really, really young, there's much better potential to go from not being very good to actually being one of the best in the world. When you're doing things that are slightly older, you're kind of like, fuck, I'm already way behind the 8 ball here. There's people been doing this for 10 years longer than me and they're already top 10 in the world. There's no way I'm going to get there. But my point kind of lost my train of thought a little bit. Like, my personality trait, and this from me versus yours, you almost see everything you do as a challenge, and I think that's what makes you good at certain things. And there's a bit of just naturalness. Like shooting would be a great example. We went shooting, right? If I have, and look, my eyesight didn't help. I'm to not make
Wait, you talking about
excuses.
the time we went clay
It,
pigeon
it,
shooting
it
or like actual like gun range shooting?
both. It doesn't matter. They were
They
both
were
not.
both
They were both
great.
not
They
great.
were both great.
But Danny will start, and she's like bang, 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 and it just hitting things naturally, right? And to be fair, there was
To be fair, I'm a Yank,
yeah, but when we did
and you are not.
but that doesn't matter. Like when we did even when we did it as a group, it was very interesting. That the other female in our group was probably similar-ish traits to you. She was good as well. Never shot a gun in her life. And then you got like me and Mark, one of our best friends, who was like, we were both pretty terrible.
Rick was all right.
Rick was good.
Yeah.
We'd all never really done it. Do you know what I mean? Rick had done it a bit more, so he'd been done it before. So but I'm not interested in shooting. And when I was missing, a big part of me didn't care. I cared because I was getting the piss taken out of me a little bit, right? And that was a laugh.
Ego.
And my ego cared, but it didn't care enough to concentrate harder each time I did it. We kept moving from station to station, and each thing got a bit harder. I go one way or the other. If I'm good at something, I lean into it. If I'm interested in something, I really lean into it, and I learn everything about it. Like I'm not into much, but training, I will study, read books on it. Business, same thing. That's more of a have to. I'm intrigued, and because we have to make money, I have to try and learn. Anyone that knows me when it comes to cars, I know so much stuff about cars. I'm obsessed. I watch video after video on car reviews and all sorts
Every
of
night.
stuff. Yeah, every night. Like and that's not my job. But if I'm not interested in something, I am like more than not interested. I'm not even interested in talking about it, trying to learn about it. Whereas I'll watch you, and again, especially if there's a means to an end, I've watched you have to figure out a task with the website or whatever, and you're not into websites,
No,
but you
absolutely.
will sit, Google, watch you will teach yourself. I will go, who can we get to do that? Because I just don't have the
Which is
patience to
normally
learn
me.
and don't want to do it. Now, those are personality traits, right? Like nutrition for me. I know that I would eat very well day in, day out if someone put the food in front of me every single day. And I didn't have to think about it.
Me.
Right? If the food's made, I'll sit and enjoy. I would need a personal chef.
Me.
Right? Whereas you will prep, put it together, do it all yourself, because first of all, you kind of somewhat enjoy prepping and doing it and cooking. Like, so do you see what I mean? I know I'm going off on a tangent here, and this is a long way of going. Look, your personality tells a lot, and as a coach, you have to feed into that and almost teach your client what they are. I think because some of us are in denial of our personality trait, and I say this to coaches a lot. Like, if you've got a client like me, and now my ego might keep saying, yeah, I'll trust me, I'll start cooking my own food, I'll plan it. Deep down, I know I'm not doing that. And deep down, I'm not doing that. So let's solve that problem. Now, it might be, it's up to you, it's a trade off, right? Can I afford a personal chef? No. Could I afford a meal prep company? Would that be an answer? Will I do it? These are all questions that you dig into. But you have to know, I think sometimes knowing what your client's not going to do and probably won't change about themselves leads you into, well, these are the options for you to achieve this the best way you can achieve it. Now, you may have to problem solve that. Running a business is no different. The best way for me to run a business is to do what I'm good at and pay a ton of other people to do the things I don't like, don't enjoy, not interested in, whatever. My business will run way better. That said, I have to be able to afford all those people. Now, if I can't afford all those people, now I have to trade off. Which things do I go, okay, there's 5 fucking things I hate. I'm willing to do these 2. And then it's a priority list. The next 3, can I get this person to do it? Can I do a deal with that person? Do I have someone who's bought into helping? Maybe he'll help. I'll get it. Timo's behind the camera, just so you all know. Timo's our videographer.
He's our guy.
He's our guy. He does a lot of this stuff, but he does a lot of this stuff because he loves hybrid. He's bought into what we're doing. In all honesty, if I could pay Timo to do this shit full time, I would, but I can't. So then there has to be a trade-off of how much of this we get. Would my business run better if Timo was in here filming this stuff every single day, posting it out there, sticking it on YouTube, helping us with all our marketing? I'm sure we'd run way better, but we don't have the means to pay for a professional videographer day in, day out.
Like most gyms.
You know what I mean? So the trade-off is, he comes in, he helps us when he can, and we put out his stuff when we can, and it massively helps. But there's other areas within the business that we have to treat like this. And I think looking at culture, and especially with Gen Pop people, looking at it like that and making sure that the client who's trying to achieve what they're trying to achieve understands all those trade-offs. And with all those trade-offs, what is our potential best case outcome, right? And can we move towards, using me again as an example, could I move towards getting better at some of these things I don't like? Maybe some stuff, but more likely not.
Baby, you haven't cooked an egg in your life.
Exactly.
Exactly.
That's what I'm saying.
You're pretty good at making toast.
Well, this is my point. At some point, you have to accept certain things won't change. And this sounds negative, right? And people always do this when it comes to personality tests and I'm working on myself and da-da-da. It's like, yeah, but working on yourself, unless you want to live a life until you die where all you think, I have to perfect myself, I have to get better at this, I have to do things I don't enjoy, I have to challenge myself, I have to, fuck me, that's time. Now, and there are things you do have to work on without a doubt, but there comes a time in your life where there's things you have to accept. You go, that is my personality. And also, there's always good and bad to certain personality traits. A personality trait that might be bad in one setting and might fuel you in people talk about, people with like a bit of a short fuse or being aggressive, and all these things come across as negative, right? I would put a lot of that under being emotional. Now, if I can channel a lot of that, depending on what the person's trying to achieve, then it can be a good thing. So whilst it can get you in trouble, I remember, you guys won't know who I'm talking about, but Alex Ferguson, one of the greatest football managers of all time, he had a few players under his, wings at different points. Roy Keane would be one, Eric Cantona would be another. Now, both of those were fiery characters. Both of those were the best in the world at what they did, but they would react a lot and they would get sent off. And then sometimes they get banned 6 or 7 games. And there was a couple of seasons where both of those key players, they missed games, and they missed that many crucial games that it cost United the title that season. And Alex Ferguson was asked, if you could take that out of the game, would you? Because, it's cost you a couple of titles. If they were just a little calmer and they didn't react and they didn't get sent off. And he was like, no, because do you know how many games we've won? Because they are fiery, they are aggressive, they do get stuck in. They do, it's easy to look at the negative of something and not go, yeah, but okay, every now and again that costs me. But more often than not, that's actually what makes me really good at shit.
Well, I do remind people everything about your personality, every decision that you've ever made has brought you to this point now, has made you as successful as you are to get to this point. So, like you said, let's lean into that, but just channel it into something that's a bit more conducive to your goals. I've got some I've got a whole bunch of stories about some of the decisions I've made, especially with my kind of personality type, because I'm type A personality. When I do something, I'm like, I'm never gonna half-ass anything. I'm gonna full ass the whole thing.
Yeah, but that was my point earlier. That's
Yeah,
what makes you good at a lot of
yeah.
things. Whereas
And
I don't even have the half-ass it. I just don't do it if I don't like it. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't want to. And again, that's
but the
maybe
things
ego.
that you like, I would say you've mastered. If
That's
we
what I
if
mean.
we
It's
look
not
at
many
your
things, but
really?
no. But I'm only interested in a
just
handful of things.
just pro boxer, pro MMA fighter, black belt in jiu-jitsu, yoga instructor that a lot of people don't know about, but I proudly tell them.
I didn't master
Um
it. I didn't master it. I would say I
Master, okay,
mastered fighting or yoga, or any of
master is
those
a
things.
challenge
But
is, yeah, maybe the wrong word to use, because I think you and I are strong believers that we're forever students of any sport, endeavor, art form, right? But you took it pretty damn far.
well, I
Even
made those things my life. I think there's a couple of ways of looking. Taking it far is it depends on what you mean by far. Like some things when it comes to sports, taking it far, some people would be like, did it pay your bills? Did you become a champion? Did you? Well, no, I didn't become any of those things. If I'm perfectly honest, as far as the actual skill of some of those things, for myself, yes, better than a lot, but really not that good. But I made it my life.
yeah,
I submersed in it for years, whether it be training, fighting, competing, coaching, and me failing, as an athlete myself, I guess a little bit, I think led me into, but I love this. And if I'm not going to be the greatest athlete, I want to be the greatest coach,
mm,
because I love that environment. I love MMA. I love jujitsu. I love boxing. I love these things. And it's like me not being that good at them did not deter me from wanting to be in that environment every single fucking day. Whereas there's other things, if I try it and I'm no good, I'm not doing it again. And the fitness industry was another one. Like, yes, I didn't get very strong compared to a lot of peers. I got in okay shape, but I'm certainly, not a bodybuilder. I'm not stepping on stage. I'm not winning any powerlifting competitions.
I mean, everyone asks when you're stepping on
Yeah,
stage, including my coach. So
but again, you know, I
we're
love
just waiting.
the environment. I love the gym. There's nowhere makes me feel more comfortable than the gym. And if I'm going to spend every single day in the gym, I'm going to find some element within the gym that I can be successful in. And that for me, again, came down to coaching, teaching other coaches, building a gym, building a business, these things. So, you know, I think tapping to that part and understanding would I, I don't know, would I have been happy if I'd have been a super successful athlete and making a fortune and money that way till I was like 40? But I don't know. Probably yes. I would have loved the fame. I would have loved the
You wouldn't have
adulation.
met me,
I
babe.
don't I don't know. But anyway, all of that stuff, but at the end of the day, I think we can still make the most out of something as long as we love it. Just because you don't make, and I think this is another personality thing, but it's like just because you don't make it to the top or make it exactly what you want it to be, do you love it enough to make it part of your lifestyle? And I think bringing that back a little bit to people's goals of losing weight, getting healthy, tapping into the bits they enjoy, but also adjusting, the perceived outcome, right? Running a gym isn't being a world champion, right? Coaching
Should be.
others to fight isn't being a pro athlete. But it's being around that environment. Now, once you realize you're not good enough for that, but you still want to be in the environment, you kind of pivot the goal within your goals. And my pivots have kept me in the fight game, in the personal training world, in gyms my whole life. My goals shifted based on my abilities over the years, but my environment of what I love doing never changed. I think with bringing people in to lose weight and look a certain way and all those sort of things, obviously, sometimes they're coming in because they want to lose weight because they just, first of all, just feel they should. They don't love training. They certainly don't love eating healthily,
It's
but they
feelings.
want the outcome.
People remember feelings,
Yeah.
right? And it's, when I meet with people and they sit down in consultations with me and they tell me, I just feel awful. I feel insecure. I feel gross in my clothing. This doesn't fit. I put on COVID weight and we're now, 4 years later and I'm still got it. And, they remember that feeling. Um, and they want to change that. They're just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And then they get in shape and they feel confident and great. And it's almost like they get complacent when they try and go off and do it on their own. And slowly but surely, they revert back to those old habits, and they start feeling crap again. But people remember how you make them feel,
Yeah.
and I think a coach's job is to get them to that point where they feel confident, they feel indestructible, they feel robust, they feel like they can do anything.
Mm. I think like
And
with
that's what
everything,
keeps people coming back. It's what keeps me coming back to sports, to athletics. I want to feel like I can do anything. And what keeps me attracted and going back to taking sports as far as I can is because I want to feel that I can do anything. And I want to prove to myself that I can. And that's from rugby to strongman to CrossFit to powerlifting to now bodybuilding. It's like shit. I wonder what the next sport may be.
mm,
I was just speaking to a friend and long term member, Marianne, last night, and she was telling me like, oh, she's in her early 40s and she's talking about fighting. And she's like, yeah, but now's not the right time, and maybe next year, blah blah blah, maybe when I'm 42. And I'm like, girl,
mm, they're not
she's
getting
got
any
she's got
younger.
two kids.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what kind of? She's like, yeah, but I gotta spend time with them. I'm like, yeah, but if you can figure out the time, if you can figure it out, and if this is something that you seriously want to do, think about what kind of example you're gonna set for your two young boys, and just how proud you're gonna feel after that. I think from a very young age, I've always had really dedicated coaches. Like, even if, and John's gonna laugh, but even if I look back to being a gymnast way back when, as a kid, I started gymnastics when I was 6, stopped when I was 14. So I did it for a solid 8 years. But even back then, I had very strict um, Chinese coaches in Hong Kong. And it was all about, and training sessions were like 3 hour sessions, and there was an hour of conditioning at the end. So there was already that we were doing 12 hours a week of training. And it was no nonsense. There was, a whole other group of girls. There were different levels. And so that you had to progress up the levels. But everyone was doing the hard work. And that from a very early age already instilled that, I guess, that like hard work mentality of this is just what we do. This is what we do. um and then, when I was in my young teens, I remember my mom asking me like, gymnastics costs a lot of money, and I'm looking at our finances, and is this something that you really want to do? Is this really something that you want to continue? And due to our like family finances, at the end of the day, I was living with my mom, my sister, and my mom's best friend in a small Hong Kong apartment, just because that was our situation. And as a 14-year-old girl, I was kind of like, I'm not going to take this much further, especially in gymnastics. You have to stop very young. And so I had to reflect then and be like, right, this has served me as far as it's going to go. And so, all right, I'm going to stop there. Um, which was hard. And then I found rugby. And rugby was great. It was fun. But again, I found, especially when I joined the national team, I had a very strict um, Chinese coach, Zanio, who I remember he was just very much about mental toughness. He's like, if you decide that you're too tired and you stop running on the pitch, the other team is going to score a try, and then you've just let the team down because you're too tired. He's like, there's a point in the game where you need to dig deep and just and just go for it. And so this is something that I really credit that coach particularly with giving me mental toughness and teaching me when to dig deep. Um, and then I've had other coaches from New Zealand, for rugby, who's also no nonsense of, right, you got to practice this. Called me out on my shit and was like, "Your passing is shit. Like your accuracy is terrible. You need to, practice, 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 practice." Um, and then with powerlifting, my dear husband here, looked at, on our some of our first few dates, looked at my technique and was like, "That's terrible. We need to fix that. We need to taper you right back in the deadlift. We need to rebuild you from the ground up." And John is someone that I credit with for all my numbers, but again, someone that was called me out my shit and also had knowledge that I didn't have. You don't know what you don't know. And so I will be the first person to hold my hand up and be like, right, who's who knows their shit? Who can help me individually with where I want to go? Because that's the fastest way that you're going to learn. And I'm an impatient person. I will go down a rabbit hole and find out all the answers that I can, and get as much information as I can and seek help for someone to help me get there. Um, and John was that person, and we got some crazy, crazy numbers. And I say that as a we because for me, it's you and your coach are a team. And that's something that I try and explain to our trainers here, and also to our clients, is that it's a team effort. And that's something that I think that we should vocalize more. It's not an individual thing. It's no, it's a team effort. And then when I decided to go into bodybuilding again, John was very much like, no, like that's like no. Um, and Rodin, who's my coach, he's someone that we've known for a very long time, and he's someone that we've got a friendship with, and who is well renowned in this industry, especially in Australia. And so I reached out to him and was like, "I'm thinking about bodybuilding. Would you take me on?" And he was very upfront with like, "This is what I expect. These are the things that I need, and this is what I expect from you as an athlete." And I remember looking down the list and going through it with John, being like, "Oh my God, he wants me to do this, 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 this. This is what's expected." I needed a couple of days to before I came back and was like, "Okay, let's do it." Because I'm that person that doesn't want to, I don't want to let my coach down. I don't want to be that kind of person that he has to chase or be disappointed in. I want to live a a life with no regrets of thinking, "Oh, I could have done that better. Oh, I could have done that better." Like there's no point in that. Always do the best you can. Um, and that's something by a book, Michael Ruiz, The Four Agreements. It's a fantastic, fantastic book. No, Miguel Ruiz. And it's, always do your best, and that's all you can ask for. And that's something that I tell my clients, in person, online. It's just do your best, and then tomorrow just repeat that, and just and just build and build upon that. And if you fuck up, okay, what can we do to address that, to rectify that, to fix that, and to make sure that it doesn't happen again? I think that's pretty simple rule to live by, maybe a little harder to put into practice, um, but it's pretty straightforward.
To, you know, give, you know, put put a couple of tactics together. So let's wrap it up by say by in what do we think are the top three things a coach can kind of do, or what we should be doing to help a client make this make this a lifestyle choice. Make, again, for me, it's always about getting someone like any long-term change. You have to start wanting this feeling, let's say, versus that feeling. You want more of this and less of this. I'm a big believer in you're either running towards something or you're running away from something, right? And that and they can both be motivational. in very different ways, right? There's either the fear of never having something, which runs you towards something, or if you do get it, and I think this is the bit that we have to tap into with our clients, we're not even discussing or talking about the fear of losing it. We do all this work to get in shape, and I think understanding how quickly you can fuck it all up and lose it, and then what that's going to cost you and how long it's going to potentially take you to get it back. Like, you know, and again, it's not about necessarily just tapping into fear, but you've worked so hard to get here. How are you going to feel if you end up back there? Is the thought of ending up back there worse than continuing to put the work in? Now, the work, and again, even from day one, understanding that the minute we go down this route of sort of health and fitness, there's no such thing as maintenance for me. I think this is where people struggle. Like, people go, "Oh, I just want to maintain." Oh, you can't. If you're maintaining, you're going backwards in all walks of life. It's not. You try maintaining a business. It's not possible. And I've seen it firsthand. I've looked at numbers where you go, "We're doing all right," and it's 3 or 4 months, and you're like, "We're consistent. We're consistently just okay." But it's very rare that if numbers are doing okay and you're kind of plodding along and you're going, "Okay, they're not going up, but they're not really going down," and you don't want to be negative, but chances are, if you're not continuing to grow, you're gonna, even if you maintain for a short amount of time, it's gonna go the other way at some point because you get complacent, and complacency becomes an issue. And that's what I mean by there's not really any such thing as maintain. You're either growing or you're regressing in something, right? If we stop studying, yes, you may maintain that knowledge for a little while, but sooner or later it starts regressing. We've seen that when
Well,
we
it's
do
also going to be
education
outdated.
sessions.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, stuff that people knew and were answering a year ago, I ask them the same question now, and if they've not restudied and learned that stuff again, they're like, "Shit, I forgot the answer to that." So you didn't maintain that knowledge.
No,
You've actually lost it.
for me, the big part of it is you need to be willing to let go of your former self if it's not doing you any favors, or at least let go of the traits of your former self that aren't doing you any favors, and acknowledging what those are. Just to add to that, I think also the fear of failure.
Oh, 100%. Look, there's a bunch of other things as well. But
Failure terrifies me more than anything.
some people say, "I don't care what anyone else thinks." I kind of hate that saying. I hate it when people say that because I'm just like, okay,
Then why did social
why,
media become such
why,
a thing?
why are you doing anything? If you don't care what anyone else thinks, I have to question that. Like, I have to question that in all walks of life, right? Because if you want to be successful, you have to care what other people think, because sooner or later it's going to be other people that open up opportunities, doors, and whatever. If you're a dickhead and go, "I don't care what anyone thinks," and I've said this to people in here, I've said, there's clients in here, there's people in here. This person, like me, I was lucky enough, to get involved with some people who wanted to invest in me as an individual to help build gyms and things. If I didn't care what other people think and I walked around like that, and being like, "Well, why should I make an effort?" They're like, "No, the opportunities are not gonna knock." You know, I don't need to, like, "Oh shit, this person's coming. I'm gonna act false and be all of a sudden start being really good at what I do." So, there is that. I don't mean you should act, but if I know that there's potential, or I'm working for a manager or a boss, like, I might need, and look, people don't get this anymore, but like, what if I don't care what my boss thinks, but then all of a sudden I need a fucking, not a review. What did they used to be called? No, well, a raise would be one thing, but what is it when you go to a new job and they get
A reference.
a reference, whatever. But there's all sorts of reasons you might need a reference. Nowadays, people don't really fucking bother with them. But it's like, if I spent my whole fucking job not giving a fuck what my boss thought, and now go, "Oh, hey, I need a reference," and they're like, "Yeah, you're average." Like, so, I think, you do have to care what other people think. And if you want to be seen as something within your industry, or within whatever, then, you know, caring what other people think can be a good thing, but also it can be a great thing in weight loss, right? Everyone's, "Oh, I don't give a fuck what other people think." Watch someone's face when they go, "Oh, wow, you're looking amazing. What have you been doing?" Tell me you don't care.
Yeah.
You don't care that that person's giving you a compliment. Like, "Hey, I don't give a shit." Like, everybody smiles, everybody softens a bit when you get a compliment. So to say we don't care is usually bullshit. It's just how much. Some people care more There's some people it motivates them more to get that pat on the back, get that recognition. Some people it's like, you can pat me on the back all day long, but I want money. Give me money. I'd rather have more money or whatever, right? But again, just to wrap this up, my again, our whole point a little bit to this has been, okay, you coach, client, coach, athlete relationship is, can we tap into all of those things we've just talked about? Me as a coach, can I tap into what makes you tick as quick as possible? Can I tap into what I see that you value? Unfortunately, I think coaches go more off what they value. I value that I'm really knowledgeable. Well, my client might not give a fuck how knowledgeable I am. They might actually just like training me because I'm funny or whatever, whatever it is. But if I don't know that, and I'm just giving, being like fucking some mad scientist going, well, my knowledge is why they keep coming, and they're going, you're boring the shit out of me with all this science shit. I'm not interested. Tell me a joke. Like, oh, do you know what I mean? You got to know that. And that doesn't mean say you don't still try to teach and educate. You just got to be like, okay, that is what I think I'm really fucking good at isn't why this person comes and sees me. And I have to understand what they see me as just as much as what I see them as. And once we can build that rapport, now I can lean into that relationship, because it is a relationship. But if you're leaning into the wrong thing, like anything, you can be repelling someone. It's like the super over friendly person on day one. You've just met them. And some people gel to that. Some people like really want that. They want to act like best mates on day one. Well, my personality trait is I've got to get to know you a little bit. I'm not that guy. So if you're talking to me and acting like best friends, like you just met someone, the next thing they're sending you memes and they're messaging you all the time, and you're like, right, this is overkill, mate. Let's just get to know each other first, right? And before you know it, you end up fucking putting a barrier up. Well, if you're that coach and you're acting like you're like best friends with your new client you've just met, that might be creating distance already. And as we've just said, 80% of people are going to quit very early on. And if they're not seeing progression, right, and they're not gelling with the coach because the coach is not picking up on their personality traits. I talked about this before, distance management between the way you stand with a client, body language. If you're in someone's face and they keep stepping back and you don't see that and you keep getting closer, like you can lose a person so quickly. Now, and when I say lose them, I think this is where coaches struggle, because these people have usually paid up for 12 weeks or so. You didn't lose them on week 12 when they left. You lost them on week 4. You lost them on week 2. You lost them maybe even in week 1 by just not building the right people.
Just being you.
Just not tapping into the kind of coach that person needs, right? And I think if you don't learn to acknowledge that, then all you do is keep making up the excuses as to why they quit on 12 weeks. It's like, no, they quit on you way before that. You quit way before you quit. In most things in life, you quit before the actual final quit happened. Even you can see it in sports. I've done it in fights. I've mentally quit before I've stopped fighting. I quit early on myself because I knew I couldn't win. So I changed my approach or whatever. Maybe I got through all the rounds. Maybe I got to the end.
I've done that on the platform.
Yeah, I knew I quit the minute the fight started.
Yeah.
I've done jiu-jitsu comps where within seconds I've gone, shit, I'm just going to fight to not lose. Or I'm going to make sure I don't get subbed. I just don't want to get subbed. But I'm not fighting to win. I quit. I know I did. Didn't mean to say I just threw my hands up and stopped fighting, but I quit trying to win.
Well, there's a whole rabbit hole that we can go down.
Yeah,
that's a whole another talking point and conversation. But yeah, should we wrap it up? Yeah. So
we did a lot of stuff.
I hope everyone's found this interesting, insightful. Hopefully you got something out of it. If you have any questions for us, then drop them in the comments. But otherwise, this is kind of the first of many that we're just going to be kind of chatting and we're going to be getting people onto the show and from the gym, from our community, internationally, and just picking their brains. But yeah, if you have any questions, then please let us know. But otherwise, like, subscribe, all that jazz. And thanks for joining us.